My two 9-year-old wife and my cousin betrayed me while spending my money, but when I discovered their plan, I had secretly annulled the marriage 4 years ago and exposed them to the entire family. I'm 54 years old. I'm an investor in real estate and technology, and I live in a penthouse in Manhattan that's worth more money than most people will earn in their entire lives. And I need to tell this story because what happened over the last 5 years basically showed me that you can't trust anyone, not even your own family, and definitely not a beautiful woman who's 25 years younger than you. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was still that naive idiot who believed in love after 50. My first wife died when I was 38, a brain aneurysm that nobody saw coming, and I was left alone with two kids, Sophie and Ethan, who were 8 and 6 at the time. I spent almost a decade focused solely on them and growing my investment portfolio, filling the void with work and more work. By the time I turned 49, my kids were already in college. My net worth had grown considerably, and I guess I started to feel that loneliness that hits you when you realize you're living in a huge apartment completely alone. So, when my friends dragged me to this charity gala in Manhattan, one of those ridiculously expensive things where people donate thousands of dollars to feel better about themselves, I had no idea my life was about to turn into a goddamn soap opera. Isabella was there, wearing a blue dress that probably cost more than a normal apartment's monthly rent, and when they introduced us, I almost laughed because she was obviously much younger than me. Like 24 at the time, but there was something about the way she talked, the way she looked at me, that made me feel like I was 30 again. She was smart, or at least I thought she was. She talked about art and philanthropy like she really cared, and when she asked for my number at the end of the night, I was already completely hooked. The truth is, I should have seen it coming, right? A guy in his late 40s with money meets a beautiful 4-year-old girl who's coincidentally very interested in him, but I was so fucking lonely that I didn't care to analyze the red flags. The next few months were like living in a movie. I mean, Isabella practically moved into my apartment after our first few dates. We started traveling together. I took her to Paris and Rome, and she acted like every moment was magical, like she was really in love with me and not my bank account. My kids were skeptical, obviously. Sophie called me one day and said, "Dad, don't you think she's a little young for you?" But I responded with all the arrogance in the world, that love has no age, that Isabella was different, that she made me feel alive again. God, what an idiot I was. I introduced Isabella to my whole life, to my friends, to my family, and of course to my cousin Julian. Julian was 39 at the time. He'd always been the charismatic guy in the family, the one everyone liked but who never quite made it professionally. He'd tried like 3 or 4 businesses that failed, and I always ended up lending him money that I knew he was never going to pay back because, well, he was family. I remember perfectly the first time Isabella and Julian met. It was at a family dinner at my house in the Hamptons, and I thought they got along well. Like he made her laugh with his stories and she seemed genuinely entertained. And I thought how nice that my wife and my cousin get along, having no fucking clue what was coming. A few months later, Julian showed up with a business proposal. A tech startup that supposedly was going to revolutionize I don't know what thing about e-commerce. And the weird thing is that Isabella was the one who encouraged me to invest. She'd say things like, "Honey, Julian is so smart. This could be his opportunity. You should support your family." And I, like the idiot I was, thought it was sweet that my fiancé cared so much about my cousin. I invested $500,000 in that shit business that, spoiler alert, never generated a penny of profit. I proposed to Isabella on a yacht in the Mediterranean, another one of those ridiculously extravagant things I did because I wanted to show her how much I loved her, or maybe because deep down I knew that without the money she wouldn't have any reason to stay with me. The ring cost $200,000. She cried and said yes, like it was the happiest moment of her life, and we started planning a wedding that would end up costing more than what most people earn in 5 years. The wedding was in the gardens of my house in the Hamptons. Like 300 guests, full orchestra, flowers imported from Ecuador, the fucking dream of any woman, or at least that's what I thought. Here's where the story gets interesting in a way I didn't expect. 4 months after the wedding, Isabella and I took a trip to La Romana in the Dominican Republic, supposedly a delayed honeymoon, because we'd been very busy with I don't know what things. What Isabella didn't know is that during that trip, At a moment when she was at the spa, I went to a legal office in downtown La Romana and annulled our marriage. Because I'm not as stupid as I look. And even though I was in love or whatever you feel at 50 for a 24-year-old girl, I'm also a businessman who protects his assets. I hired a Dominican lawyer who explained that under certain circumstances I could obtain an annulment that would technically invalidate the marriage from its inception, and that's exactly what I did. I kept those papers in my safe at the office and never told Isabella anything. Legally, from that moment on, we were no longer spouses, though she had no idea. The next 3 years were probably the strangest of my life because externally everything seemed perfect. I mean, Isabella and I lived like the rich, happy couple that everyone envied. We traveled to Dubai and Bali. She organized dinners at our penthouse. I bought her whatever she wanted: Hermes bags, jewelry, designer clothes, and she kept acting like the loving wife. But something started to change subtly. Like when she started staying out late more often, she'd say she was meeting with friends or had charity events. And I didn't think much about it because, honestly, I also had my busy life with business meetings and trips. Then I started to notice that when we were together, she seemed distracted, like she was physically there but mentally somewhere else. And sometimes I'd catch her looking at her phone with a smile that wasn't directed at me. One night we were at home and she was on the terrace talking on the phone, and I went out to bring her a glass of wine without her hearing me approach, and I heard her say he's so boring. Like all he does is work and talk about investments, but he's stable, and the money obviously is good. My chest tightened when I heard that, but I didn't say anything. I went back inside and acted like nothing had happened. Things got worse when one day I grabbed her phone because mine had run out of battery, and I needed to make a call. And I saw a text message from someone saved as L that said, "Can't stop thinking about last night," with a heart emoji. I felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach, but I controlled myself, took a photo of the screen with my phone, and put hers back where it was like nothing happened. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering who the fuck L was and what had happened last night. I started paying more attention, and one thing I noticed was that Isabella seemed especially animated every time my cousin Julian showed up at the house or when we went to family events. At a family dinner at my parents' house, I saw them talking in the garden, and the way Julian touched her arm, the way she laughed with him, was different from how she interacted with other family members. I still didn't want to believe it, like he was my cousin, my own blood. He couldn't be that much of a son of a bitch, right? One day, while Isabella was in the shower, I managed to unlock her phone. She used my birthday as the password, which was ironic considering what I was about to discover, and I started checking her messages. What I found basically destroyed me and enraged me at the same time. There were explicit messages with Julian. And when I say explicit, I mean photos, videos, conversations about when I was going to be out of town so they could see each other, detailed plans about how they were going to use my money to eventually leave together, references to other guys too, at least 2 or 3 more that apparently Isabella had been seeing while I paid for her entire lifestyle. There were messages where Julian and she made fun of me, where he said things like, "Just hang in there a little longer. The old man has to die eventually, and if we keep playing this right, we can get much more out of him." I sat on the edge of the bed with her phone in my hand, and my hands were shaking so much, I almost dropped it. Isabella came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, saw me with the phone, and her face went white. But before she could say anything, I handed the phone back to her and said in the calmest voice, I'm going out for a while." And I left the apartment before doing something I might regret. The next few days were like being on autopilot. I kept acting normal at home, while inside, I was planning exactly what I was going to do. The first thing was to talk to my lawyers and my accountant, and we systematically started transferring assets, changing bank accounts, cutting off Isabella's access to all my money. She had credit cards linked to my accounts, access to a shared account with like $50,000 that she used for her expenses. Automatic transfers I'd set up so she'd have her own monthly income, and I cut all of that in a matter of a week. Isabella started to notice something was wrong when her credit card was declined at Bergdorf Goodman while she was trying to buy an $8,000 bag. She called me totally confused, saying there must be some mistake, that the card should work, and I told her very calmly, "Oh, Must be a problem with the bank. I'll look into it. Knowing perfectly well there was no mistake. When I got home that night, she was nervous, asked me if there were problems with the finances, if something was wrong with the investments, and I simply told her everything's fine. Don't worry. While inside, I was enjoying watching her start to panic. Then I went after Julian. I showed up at his office, that miserable co-working space where he was trying to keep his latest failed startup alive with my money, and asked to speak in private. I closed the conference room door and told him very directly, I know what you've been doing with my wife. I know you've been fucking Isabella while I paid your bills. His face went through like 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. He tried to deny it, to act confused, but I pulled out my phone and started showing him screenshots of the messages, the photos, everything. He went quiet, and then tried to justify himself, saying that Isabella had seduced him. That he'd tried to resist, but she was very insistent, basically trying to play the victim. I told him to shut the fuck up and that I was going to destroy him. That every member of our family was going to know exactly what kind of treacherous parasite he was. That same night, I invited Isabella to dinner at one of our favorite restaurants, a super expensive place with Michelin stars where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. She arrived beautifully dressed, clearly trying to regain my attention because she already knew something wasn't right with the money. We ordered wine, food that probably cost $1,000, and halfway through dinner, I simply told her, I know you've been cheating on me with Julian. I know you've been with other men too, and I know exactly what you've been planning. She tried to deny it at first, then started crying, then got angry and told me I was an absent and boring husband, that I never paid attention to her, that she needed more than what I could give her. Basically the whole repertoire of justifications that an unfaithful person uses when they get caught. I let her finish her little speech, took a sip of my wine, and pulled out an envelope from my inside pocket. I said, remember our trip to La Romana almost 4 years ago? She nodded, confused. I passed her the envelope and said, open it. Inside were certified copies of the marriage annulment documents. She read them, at first not understanding, then her face completely changed when she comprehended what they meant. You were never married to me, I told her. Legally, for almost 4 years now, you're not my wife, you have no right to any of my assets, you're nothing more than my girlfriend or whatever you want to call yourself. Isabella started hyperventilating right there in the restaurant. People were staring at us. I explained that I'd cut off her access to everything, that the bank accounts were empty, that the credit cards were canceled, that the penthouse was solely in my name, and that basically, she had nothing. She started screaming, calling me manipulative and controlling, saying she was going to sue me, and I simply laughed and told her, sue whatever you want. You're not my legal wife. You have absolutely no right to anything I have. And the next few days were satisfyingly chaotic. Isabella was still living in the apartment because technically I hadn't kicked her out yet, but we slept in separate rooms and every interaction was tense. She tried to be sweet, to act like she could fix things, told me we could go to couples therapy, that she could change, but I'd already made my decision. A week later, I told her she had 24 hours to get her stuff out of the apartment, and if she didn't, I was going to change the locks and throw everything in the trash. Watching her pack her suitcases, reduced from the luxury life I'd be, given her to literally suitcases and boxes, was probably one of the most satisfying moments of this whole shit show. She went to live in a friend's guest room in Brooklyn, from a penthouse in Manhattan to a room in Brooklyn, and every time I thought about it, I felt a little better. But I still wasn't done with Julian. I organized a family meeting at my house in the Hamptons, invited everyone, uncles, aunts, cousins, my parents, basically the whole extended family. Julian showed up not knowing what awaited him, probably thinking it was just another boring family gathering. Once everyone was there, I stood in front of everyone with my laptop and a projector and started presenting evidence. I showed screenshots of the messages between Julian and Isabella, read out loud some of the most explicit texts where they made fun of me, where they planned how to get more money out of me, showed evidence of the 3 or 4 other failed investments where Julian had misappropriated funds I'd given him. My mother started crying, my father turned red with rage, and the rest of the family stayed completely shocked in silence. Julian tried to defend himself, to say it was all taken out of context, that Isabella had manipulated him, but my younger cousin, who had always admired Julian, stood up and said, "You're a disgrace to this family." And one by one, members of my family literally turned their backs on him. My father, who had always been protective of his nephew, was the last to speak, and simply told him, "I don't want to see you again. You're not welcome at any family gathering. Basically, you're excluded from the family." Julian left that house alone, with no one defending him, and I finally felt like I'd regained some control. It's been like 6 months since all that. Isabella tried to contact me several times, first with apology messages, then with empty legal threats, then with pathetic pleas for me to help her financially. I blocked her number after the 10th time. From what I know through mutual friends, she now works at some boutique clothing store in the West Village and lives with roommates. Basically the kind of life a 9-year-old girl, without a college degree, and without a rich man to support her, would have. Julian apparently left New York. I think he moved to Miami or Los Angeles, trying to start over where nobody knows his story. But honestly, I don't care enough to keep track. My kids, Sophie and Ethan, finally told me, "We told you so, Dad." But they said it lovingly, without the "I told you so" that I deserved. I spent Christmas with them and my parents, without Isabella for the first time in 5 years, and it was strangely liberating not having to pretend, not having to act like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Do I regret anything? Maybe being so blind at the beginning, ignoring the red flags because I was lonely and wanted to believe that someone really loved me for who I was and not for what I had. But I don't regret how I handled the situation once I discovered the truth. I was strategic, I was calculating, and I made sure that both Isabella and Julian paid for trying to play me. The other day, I was in my office reviewing contracts, and I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't feel that constant anxiety in my chest, that feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't know exactly what. Now I know exactly where I stand, completely alone again, but at least with the certainty that nobody's trying to rob me or use me. And I guess that's enough for now.